Hey, what's up everyone? This is Brendan Bias from checkit.com and welcome to another Tutorial Tuesday. Now, before I go rushing into this tutorial, which I've been trying to do for like the last 3 weeks or so and just haven't been able to do it, which is kind of why you haven't seen any videos. I apologize for that. Kind of pathetic on my end. But yeah, before I go into all this, why don't we just take a moment to just kind of relax and, I don't know, just talk to one another. And shoot, where do we even begin? How was your day? How has your day been going? Mine's been pretty mellow. I haven't really been doing a whole lot. I just went to school, and now I'm home from school, and I practiced the tutorial. Now I'm making the tutorial, and I'm also burning some beautiful smelling incense, which is actually getting a little low. I should keep my eye on that. So yeah, just leave a comment, let me know how your day is going, and yeah, let's be friends. Shoot, even add me on Facebook if you so choose. I'll add you. And yeah, now that we're all like good friends and all that, why don't we do the whole, buddy thing and, help each other out. So I'll make you this video, and in return, you should like it, or subscribe if you haven't already, and, comment if you haven't decided to already, and yeah, so let's just, call that fair. I make you a video, and you like it for me. How about that? It's a pretty good trade-off, right? Sure. Let's go with that. Now, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into today's tutorial. So, today what we're going over is actually something that people have been requesting for maybe the last year or so. I just didn't really know how to go about doing it in a good way until today. And even now I still don't exactly know what I'm doing. So bear with me if I end up referring back to some, tests and all that to make sure I do everything right, because it's very, very experimental. So anyway, the picture that we're using is this little guy right here, and by this little guy I mean me. This is me doing my failure of an act, trying to make myself look like I'm defending myself from an imaginary explosion, which we are indeed adding to the picture. We have an imaginary explosion just blowing me away to pieces. Pretty epic, huh? Now, just really quick, I want to mention that this is indeed supposed to simulate like an atomic... Whoa, what the... No, go away. Keep the current color scheme and don't show this message again. Shut up. My computer's good enough. So anyway, I just want to mention that someone thought, actually a couple of people thought that this was some kind of like vampire effect, which doesn't make any sense whatsoever, since when is the sun like off to the side on the street rather than up in the sky? It just makes no sense whatsoever. How did you get that? I'm sorry, I just had to mention it. It was bugging me, alright? To get off my back. And so anyway, this is the overall effect that we're going over, and this is how it's going to most likely end up for you. But I'm also going to really quickly go over some photo looks and just kind of showing you how photo looks like if you were to apply it to this particular image, and just, kind of go over that briefly, just because it makes it look really nice if you were to apply this, this effect to it. So... anyway, you kind of get the general idea of how this looks. Now let's go ahead and get into the tutorial. So this is the image that you should be able to download by visiting the link in the description if you want to follow along, which I would recommend because this might not work quite the same way if you happen to be on a different picture, okay? So one thing that you need to know about this picture is that it is ginormous. So if I go into 100%, this is the actual scale of the entire photo. It's 5184 by 3456, which is huge. And the brushes that we're going to be using here pretty soon are not that big. So we need to scale down this image in order to compensate for the size of the brushes that we're going to be using later on. So to fix this, we're going to go to Image, and we'll go to Image Size. And we're going to change the width to 1920, and it should auto-scale the height to 1280 if you have the constrained proportions checkmarked right there. And with that, we'll hit OK, and you see how much smaller that makes it, and we'll hit Control-0 to zoom into canvas size. So now that we've got everything sized to the correct dimensions and all that, let's go ahead and start off by creating some kind of makeshift meaty texture to kind of simulate where the skin is kind of being pulled off of my arms and my hands and all that. So I'm going to go ahead and make a new layer, and we'll just call this flesh. And also, if you decide to just use a flesh texture, you can do that too, so you don't even have to worry about making this. But In the meantime, let's just go ahead and fill this in by hitting Shift Backspace. And it doesn't matter what color you use because we're going to be using a filter soon anyway, so 50% gray will do for the time being. And so now let's change our foreground color to, let's just make it a dark red color, so somewhere over there, and we'll hit OK. And then let's change our background color to, let's make it a slight, like pinkish color, something around, maybe somewhere around there, so that's D00027, something around there. And also I'll just give you what color red I'm using. I'm using 790000, pretty straightforward. And so with this flesh layer selected, let's go to filter and we'll go to render and we'll choose fibers. Now when it comes to the fibers, you can use any set of variance and strength that you want, but I'll stick with a variance of 20 and a strength of 6, and we'll just hit randomize a couple of times just for fun, and we'll hit OK. So of course these fibers going straight up and down, but my arms were at an angle. So we're going to hit the Command Control T or Command T if you're on a Mac to bring up this transform tool. And I'm going to go set the opacity over here to about 50%. And I'll zoom out using my scroll wheel, which is an option I enabled in my preferences if you haven't done that already. And I'll just click and drag outside this box to rotate it until it looks like it's more matched up with the angle of my arms. It doesn't have to be perfect because you're really not going to see this all too much. So once you've got that at a good enough angle, we'll click and drag one of these corners while holding the Alt and the Shift key. That would be Option and Shift if you're on a Mac. And we'll just scale this up until it fits the entire canvas, or until it's just big enough to overlap all of the parts that have skin on this image. So once you've got that at a good size, just hit the check mark up top to commit that transformation, and we'll hit Control 0 once again to zoom into canvas size here. So let's change the opacity of this back to 100% for the flesh. And let's select the background layer and duplicate that by hitting Control or Command J. And we'll rename this background copy to Disintegrate. Took me a while to figure out how that was spelled. And let's go ahead and drag this up on top of the flesh layer right here. And so what we'll do with this layer is add a layer mask on top of it. And then we'll grab our brush tool and we are going to right click somewhere on the canvas to bring up these brush options and all that. And I've added in these debris brushes, I guess they're called. To get those, I'll just show you how. So I'll reset my brushes, hit OK. So normally this is what you're going to see when you right click with your brush tool. And you're going to want to click this little cog over here, and you're going to want to load up the debris brushes by Zigaboo. I have no idea why there's so many O's, but you're going to click that and you'll hit append. And when it comes to actually adding brushes to this list, you can see that I have a lot of brushes on here. You have to add the brush file to your brushes folder in Photoshop. And there's a lot of places that teach you how to do this. Just look it up on Google, how to add brushes into Photoshop, and you should be set to go. So with those brushes appended to our default set, just kind of scroll down, you'll see that we've got these brushes down at the bottom. And we'll just kind of click on one of these to choose them, and you see we've got this crazy looking debris brush going on. And just a quick tip, if you want to scale this down, just use the left bracket key on your keyboard, and if you want to scale it up, use the right bracket key on your keyboard. Okay, so I'll actually go ahead and scale this down, and I'll just kind of click somewhere like maybe over here, maybe not right there, maybe we'll just put it down somewhere. Okay, that's looking pretty good. And also make sure you have black as your foreground color, so that way when you click, it reveals the flesh texture underneath the disintegrate layer over here. And also keep in mind while you're clicking around and all that, all you really need to focus on is the skin itself and where the debris is being applied to the skin, because we are going to do a quick fix up later on to get rid of all of the extra splatters and all that. So I'm just going to go through, select some random brushes and apply them to the image, and we'll just fast forward this so you don't have to wait through it all. Okay, so now I've just gone through and applied these this debris to the image here to make it look like I've just got blood splattered all over my arms, my hands, and all that. So now we've got it just all over the place and we need to clean that up a little bit. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to go back to the default brush and I'm going to make sure the hardness is at 100%. And of course, you'll just mess with the size later on. So I'll hit the enter key to get rid of that little menu there. And let's also go to our brush panel over here. If you don't have that, you can just push F5 on your keyboard, or you can go to Window and Brush is right there on the menu. And I'm going to set the spacing down to 1% so that way the brush itself is always smooth no matter how far you drag it along. A little hard to explain, but you can kind of picture what I mean, I hope. So anyway, I'll use the left bracket key to size down my brush, and I'm just going to, my bad, with white as the foreground color and not black. I messed up there, admittedly. With white as your foreground color, just kind of go through and paint white on the mask on the areas where you want to get rid of those paint splatters and all that. And just some things that you want to keep in mind is that you can always go back and patch things up. So you can just take your time, and the more time you put into it, the better the effect turns out. Because something like this will take a little while to do to make it look right, because there's a lot of splatters going around right now. So once again, I'll just fast forward through this so you don't have to wait around and watch me just mask off all of the paint splatters that you see. Or not the paint splatters, the blood splatters that you see going on around the edges and all that. So yeah, you get the idea. Let's just go ahead and start fast forwarding this. Okay, so I've gone through and masked away all of the extra debris and blood splatters and all that I seem to have missed and all that. Now, just a quick tip for those of you that are unsure whether or not you've gotten all of the extra splatters removed. One thing that you can do to kind of take a look at the mask is to Alt-click or Option-click the layer mask itself, and just kind of take a look at the overall shape of the debris and the splatters and all that, to just kind of see if there are anything that if there's anything that you missed. And I do see that up here in this top right hand corner there are some random black and gray areas, so I can just go through, get rid of that, and I know that those splatters were successfully removed. And then I'll just go back and click on the original thumbnail to go back to our original selection. Now there's a few more things that I want to mention. For example, you want to go to like overlapping parts, kind of like on your fingers and all that, and double check that there aren't any splatters that are just continuing from one to the other. For example, on this particular splatter right here, it's going from my middle finger to my pointer finger, which really wouldn't happen in real life. So I'll just, oops, why am I not, there we go. I need to undo that, go to my mask, and then not fail twice in a row. There we go. So I just kind of masked off that little bit on my middle finger, so that way the splatter just looks like it's only on my pointer finger. So just kind of go through and make sure you don't have any anomalies like that going on to where splatters are overlapping into areas that they shouldn't. And it shouldn't be too big of a process because there's really only a couple places here and there where that could happen. And also, one thing that I should mention is that sometimes the splatters just seem like they're a little too large, I suppose. So maybe what you could do is go to one that just doesn't look that great. Maybe this thing right here is just an awkward splatter that I want to get rid of. So since I've got a hard brush, if I were to just go through and get rid of some of it, it would actually blend pretty well, especially when you go look at it from a far point of view. You really don't notice that I just went through and changed that splatter. So you can go through, if you so choose, change up some of these larger splatters so that they're a little bit thinner, and just kind of trim them down a little bit to better, go with the feel of the entire photo here. Unless you really do decide to go with large splatters instead of lots of smaller ones like I've done here. It's really just a matter of opinion and, things of that sort. So just something to keep in mind if you do decide to do something along those lines. Alright, so one thing that you're probably wondering is why I decided to make a layer on top of the flesh layer with the mask rather than just masking the flesh itself. And I'll just go ahead and tell you that the original reason I went ahead and did this is because I thought it would be kind of cool if I applied a drop shadow to the disintegrate layer. So if I were to just do that and I set the angle to like, I don't know, 4 or 5 degrees and set the distance to 1 and maybe put down the size to 2 or 3, then I would have a little bit of an inner shadow going on with the blood kind of a thing going on here. But it really doesn't look all that fantastic. I mean, sometimes you can get a good look, so maybe this time I would decide that I like that and just hit OK, zoom out, and you know what? I think I really do like that. So that's the original idea behind applying the blood look to another layer rather than just masking the flesh itself. So that's just something for those of you that are actually good with Photoshop and know what I'm talking about here. Okay, so now that my arms are all bloodied up, let's go ahead and add in some skin to kind of... Oh, I got a text message. Sorry, Kevin, have to talk to you later. And anyway, now that we want to add in some skin, one of your options is to stretch this original image to hopefully make it look like it's, the skin and all that. But what I like to do instead is bring in an actual skin texture. And the one that I want to use, which is a really good texture in my opinion, is possibly under copyright, so I can't actually show you it in this video. Instead, I will just post a link to it in the description for you to use. And I'm just going to demonstrate what you do with that texture with just a black layer. So this black layer is going to simulate the skin texture for the time being, alright? So imagine that this black layer right here, geez, can't talk, is your skin texture, okay? So with your skin layer selected, let's add a blank layer mask to it. So to do that, let's mouse over the layer mask icon at the bottom right next to the effects icon, and while holding the Alt key if you're on a PC or the Option key if you're on a Mac, we'll give that a click. Now we'll add a black or blank layer mask to the skin layer right here. And next what we'll do, we'll go back to our brushes and we'll right click and let's go ahead and choose one of our brushes here. And making sure that white is your foreground color, let's choose a different brush. There we go. With white as your foreground color, just kind of just size down your brush accordingly and click somewhere that looks pretty good. So maybe I'll just click right there. And you'll see that the black texture starts coming back where I put that brush. So just kind of go through, change up your brush on occasion. And maybe we'll put this one right here, kind of coming off. And just go through, add in brushes where you want them to be. And in this case, it actually is okay to kind of over-exaggerate how much debris is coming off, because it just makes it look a little bit more epic if you add in more. So I guess more is better to a certain extent when you're adding in the skin texture here. So just kind of, have fun with that. Just go with it as you see fit. And I'm just going to really quick off camera bring in that skin texture and apply the layer mask to it just so you can still get an idea of how it should look. Alright, so now I've got my skin texture in here so you can get a better idea of how this is supposed to look and all that. But one problem about this texture is that it's not very bright. You can see that it doesn't really match my skin tone. So I'm going to go to my adjustments layer, or not layer, my adjustments tab, and I'll add a curves adjustment layer. I'm going to click this icon right here to make it a clipping mask to that skin, and then I'll click and drag from the middle upwards to brighten it up until it's to a point that I think just fits my overall skin tone. So somewhere right there is actually looking pretty decent, and yeah, there we go. Now before I get too far ahead of myself, I do realize that there are some skin flakes here and there that I don't like, so I'll go back to the layer mask of my skin, go back to my brush, and let's just grab this hard brush right here. And it's pretty big, so we'll scale it down, set black as my foreground color, and we'll get rid of some of these flakes and maybe keep some of those because they look pretty good. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is before I forget, because I usually tend to forget this step, I'm going to add a bit of motion blur to this effect to kind of simulate the fact that I'm being blown away to smithereens and all that. So let's go to the disintegrate layer, and we'll duplicate that with Control J or Command J if you're on a Mac, and I'm just going to rename this to blur. And I'm going to go to the layer mask, and I'm going to fill it in with white by hitting Control, Backspace, or Command Delete if you're on a Mac, because I do see that I have a white as my background color over there. And so let's see, now let's just select the actual thumbnail for the blur layer, and we'll go to filter, and we'll go to there we go, blur, and we'll go to motion blur. And for this, I just keep the angle at 0 with a distance of 50 pixels. You can, make that a little bit larger if you so choose, but we'll just hit OK to call it good. And so let's go back to the mask for the blur layer, and we'll invert that by hitting Control I or Command I if you're on a Mac. That way it hides everything on the layer. And now let's right click and change our brush hardness back down to 0, maybe scale it up a little bit. And so now let's set our foreground color back to white, and we'll scale it up some more. And let's just start painting in white on the areas where we want this motion blur to be applied. So we'll apply it to everything in the background right here. And let's also apply it to like the back of my hand, my fingers, and my arm right here. Just to kind of simulate that motion blur coming off of my arm and all that. And let's do a little bit around my fingers right here, in between the fingers and right around there. Again, around the arm, maybe on the shirt just a little bit. And let's do down in this corner, maybe over here. And let's just do a random spot here on my shirt and my shoulder. And there we go, starting to look good. Nice motion blur. You can apply this whenever you want. I just know that I was probably going to forget later on, so just getting this out of the way right now before I forget and all that. Alright, so now that the disintegration part of it is looking alright, let's go ahead and add in some dramatic lighting and things of that sort to make this a little bit more intense. So let's just rename this first curves layer skin so we don't get it confused with our next adjustment layer we're throwing in. So let's add another curves adjustment layer, and we'll just rename this to contrast. And let's just give us a gentle contrast by lowering the darks on the curves and then brightening up some of the lights, maybe not quite so intense. There we go. And so this is just to add just a very gentle contrasting to the overall image here. And so next what we're going to do is create a gradient to simulate the highlights on the right and creating some harsh shadows on the left. So let's go to layer, and we'll make a new fill layer, and we'll choose gradient. And for this, I'll just call it gradient. It's really not that important. And we'll set the mode to overlay, and we'll hit OK. And so let's go ahead and click on the gradient itself. And let's click the third icon to set a default black to white gradient here. But we'll actually double click the white slider and change it to more of a maybe a slight tan color. So let's go between the red and the yellow to make an orange, and we'll just click and drag this in that direction, maybe a little grayish in there. And we can go back and tweak this later, so I hit OK and OK again. And let's change the angle down to 0 just to see how this is looking. Looks like it needs to be a little more orange to me, so maybe we'll change this up a little. There we go. Now it's looking a little more fiery kind of looking. I don't know. So just kind of mess with that until you get something that you think looks good in your opinion, and hit OK through all of these little menus, and there we go. So once again, we want to intensify the feeling that there's a blast over here. So let's make a new layer, and we'll call this light. And so let's grab our brush tool, and we'll set our foreground color to white for the time being. It really does not matter. And we'll size up our brush till it's roughly the same height as the overall document. And we'll just click and drag, or sorry, not click and drag. We'll just click to add a nice little spotlight here on the right side. Now, like I said, I made this white, but it's really not that important what color it is, because we're going to change the fill of the light layer to 0%. And then with that light layer selected, let's add a color overlay. And for the blend mode of the color overlay, we'll change that to linear dodge, and we'll change the color to a more orangey kind of color. So as you can see, we got a nice kind of a intensity going on now. And we'll hit OK. And next we'll go back and add a gradient overlay to it. And for this, we'll set the blend mode to color dodge. We'll toggle the reverse on the gradient, and we'll set the style to radial. And as you can see, that made a nice little spotlight here in the center of the layer here. And we'll just click and drag that off to the right, and you'll see that we can change the position of that little spotlight. And we'll just kind of put it like right on this car, just to make it look like it's a little bit brighter right there. And let's hit OK. So one thing I've noticed is that it's not exactly tall enough when you make this. So let's bring up the transform tool by hitting Control T or Command T if you're on a Mac. And let's just click and drag one of these, the height handles, I guess you could call them, while holding the Alt key, just to kind of stretch it up and down. And you'd be dragging this while holding the Option key if you're on a Mac, by the way. And when that's a good looking height, just hit the little check mark. And I'll just show you a little bit of before and after. And you can see that it just stretches it and brightens it up vertically just to, I don't know, make it look like it's more proportional with the overall image, I suppose you could say. And so the next thing we'll do is maybe add in a little bit of a simulation of some light rays going through my hand. So to do that, let's add a layer mask to the light layer. Let's go to our brush tool, and again we'll make sure that it has a hardness of 0%, and we'll actually scale it down. There we go, looking pretty good. And let's set our foreground color to black, and we'll change the opacity to maybe 40% on our brush up there. And what you're going to do is decide where you want a light streak to be. So maybe I want it to start right here where my pointer finger and my thumb join up right here. And I'll just click and drag down and to the left just to kind of erase some of that light. And maybe I'll size it down a little bit, and I'll just click and drag more down to the left. You know what, let's change the opacity down to 20% to make this a little bit softer. And let's add another one between these two fingers up and to the left. And we'll just keep clicking and dragging, and changing up the size a little bit until we get something that looks pretty decent. And we'll even add another one up this direction like so. And just keep going back and forth until you get something that looks pretty good. And maybe we can try to add another one right there. Okay, so I admit this is a little bit cheesily done, but that's not the point. The point is to just kind of simulate that there's rays of light coming through your hand, and I think it actually looks pretty decent right now, so I will just call that a mission success. Now, unfortunately, some of the blood it still looks a little too intense. So one thing that we can do to kind of dumb down the blood, since it's kind of fading into the light anyway, is we can go back to the flesh layer. Let's add a layer mask to it. And with our opacity still at 20%, let's just, actually, sorry, no, that's a different step. My bad. Let's go back to the disintegrate layer, actually, and we'll go to the layer mask for it. And with black as we'll do white as our foreground color, and we'll click and drag on the portions of the blood there that we want to kind of fade out a little bit. So I'll just fade out all of this blood right here. There we go. There we go. That looks a lot better. Still a little bit too intense here and there. Now, the thing that I actually did want to mention is, oh, never mind. The flesh is for something a little bit different. So one thing that we can do to kind of simulate a little bit more of the fact that my hands are being burned and all that is by adding a soft black brush to this, and we'll just click and drag on the areas where we want it to look a little bit more red. So maybe my fingers and all that, and maybe a little too intense right there. There we go. Beautiful. So just kind of paint in black with a soft brush on that disintegrate layer to just sort of, simulate that they're red. And oh, now I remember. The original reason I added a layer mask to the flesh layer is so that way you can get rid of it, as we were doing earlier. So I could paint in black on these areas right here, just to kind of dim them out a little bit without losing the original, the original mask of the disintegrate layer, I guess I should say. Here's what I'm trying to say. If I were to add a layer mask to the flesh layer, if I got rid of the blood right here on my hand, so just to demonstrate, I'll do this at 100% opacity. If I got rid of all this blood, trying to, kind of tone down the effect, I could switch back to white and still bring that back to, just to kind of compensate and still have that bloody texture to it. So that was what I was trying to accomplish with the combination of the mask on the flesh and the mask on the disintegrate layer. So I admit I effed that up a little bit, but hopefully you still get the general idea of why there's two masks on the two different layers there, okay? So failures aside, we've actually got something pretty good looking here. I mean, I really can't think of anything else that you would want to add to this. We've got the rays of light coming through our hand. We made our hand a little bit reddish by messing with the mask of the disintegrate layer. And I don't know, everything is just starting to blend together really well. But one thing that we actually can add, now that I think about it, is to make the flakes of skin look like they're catching fire as they get blown off. So the way that we can do that, let's actually go ahead and grab a fire texture. You can actually download this entire texture pack that I put together myself for free, so I'll just put the link to that in the description. And let's just click and drag one of these textures in here. And I'll just put it on its side, like so. And I'll just scale it up until it's, you know, big enough to cover most of the canvas. And I'll put it over here. And let's go ahead and put this right above the adjustment layer for the skin there. Woo, there we go, kind of big. And let's change the blend mode of this fire. I'll go ahead and rename that. Let's set that to screen, so that way you can see through it and all that. And so now let's go ahead and duplicate the mask of the skin texture over here. And to do that, we'll hold the Alt key since I'm on a PC. It would be the Option key if you're on a Mac. And we'll click and drag that mask to the fire layer to kind of duplicate it over like so. And so now with the layer mask of the fire layer selected, we'll go to Filter. Let's go to Stylize and go to Wind. The method is set to Wind and the direction is set to from the right. And with that, we'll hit OK. And then we can go back and do Filter, and Wind is right there. You can hit Control F as well. And now we'll go to Filter and go to Blur, Gaussian Blur. And we'll just set that to a radius of like 2 or maybe 1.8, somewhere in there. And then we'll hit OK. So now the fire is starting to look like it's, taking more effect to everything. But let's go ahead and add one more thing to this, or to the fire, I should say, by making it a little wavy looking. So to do that, we're going to go to Filter, Distort, Wave. And for this, we'll keep it simple. Let's keep the type as sine, the number of generators to 1, the wavelength from 10 to 120, which I believe is the default. And we'll do the amplitude from 1 to 50. And then the scale has a 1% horizontal and a 10% vertical. And we'll just hit OK with that. And so now everything should be a little wavy looking. So kind of make it look a little bit more realistic. So now we've got the skin looking like it's on fire as it gets blown away. We are actually pretty much done with the overall look. Now if you don't have this plugin I'm about to show you, that's okay, because you should basically be done. But if you want to add a little bit more pizzazz to the overall effect here, what you might want to consider getting is a plugin called Photo Looks, which is a product by Magic Bullet. So to apply this, we need a full raster image. So in order to make that, let's select our topmost layer, which in this case is the light layer. And let's use our shortcut Control, Alt, Shift E, or Command Option Shift E if you're on a Mac. And for this, we'll just rename this as Photo Looks. And we'll go to Filter, and it's a Magic Bullet plugin, and it's called Photo Looks. And this is a really, really neat plugin. It's just got all these different like special effects and horror styles, and the one that I'm using right now is a stock emulation called Bleach Bypass Light. And just need to zoom out and zoom back in to refresh that, and you can just see the overall look that it gives the image. And personally, I think it's a little bit too bright. Maybe I'll just turn off I'll just turn off the curves by clicking that little red icon that you see on the top right there. It's just because it just makes it a little bit too bright in my personal opinion, so just something to keep in mind. And I don't know, I just think this look by itself looks really nice. I won't change up any of the diffusion or any of the other settings, so I hit OK. And once that's done, I realize that it might be still a little too bright, so I'll change the fill down to about maybe 65% to kind of blend with the original there. And one last thing I will add is a little bit of soft contrasting to it. So to do that, I will duplicate the photo looks layer by hitting Control J or Command J if you happen to be on a Mac. And let's just rename this to Photo Looks Blur. And now we'll do Filter, we'll do Blur, Gaussian Blur, and we'll set that to a radius of, let's try 50. Maybe not. You know what? Real quick, let's change the fill back up, and now let's do the blur just to see exactly how much blur we want to add. Let's do around, yeah, that's looking pretty good. So 11.4 on the radius there. We'll hit OK. And now we'll set the blend mode to soft lights, so a little before and after of that layer being applied there. And there you go, we've got a very beautiful effect. So there you go, guys. That is my version of the Disintegrate effect, which you guys have been requesting for a very, very long time now. And I don't know, this was kind of a weird tutorial for me in terms of explaining all of the aspects behind it and all that. So by all means, let me know what you think, and maybe give me some pointers on ways I could probably improve this effect, or maybe other effects in the future. And also just, again, leave some love, like, comment, subscribe if you haven't, all of that good jazz, because the more the merrier, and we love having more subscribers. And also, if you want to, what was I going to say? I was probably just going to suggest to add me on Facebook, because I am on Facebook, and I talk to fans and all that. I do admit I haven't been doing that as much lately. I should work on that. I apologize. Alright, so anyway, I'm sure this tutorial is long enough. I have no idea how long I've been recording now, so I'm just going to call it a day, let you guys get back to your Tuesday, and, hopefully you guys can finish this effect properly, and yeah. So, once again, this is Brandon Bias from TutorCheckIt.com. I'll see you guys next Tuesday.